Well, hello and welcome to this live stream on preparing your 5 to 11-year-old for their COVID vaccine. I am your host, John Seward, and today we're coming to you live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Today's live stream is being sponsored by the Maltby Center and KFNL&A Public Health. Almost got that mixed up. Now, the Maltby Center is a 25-year-old nonprofit organization that provides mental health and autism services to children and youth in Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington. Their vision is inclusion, acceptance, a life without barriers. You can find out more about the Maltby Center at maltbycenter.ca. And the Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington Public Health is our local public health agency with over 200 staff and 150 volunteers who deliver public health programs and services to the people of KFLNA. Their commitment is to provide public health programs and services of the highest quality, and of course, keeping our community safe during this pandemic. Well, the COVID-19 vaccines for kids aged 5 to 11 are here. And now's the time for parents to prepare. So we're going to try to answer some questions tonight about parents or for parents. A reminder, though, that at this time, the Maltby Center is not requiring families and clients to provide proof of vaccination because we are an essential service. Now, before we introduce our guests, if you have a question, just start typing it in on Facebook or Twitter, and we will respond. We also have some questions that were sent in advance and that we plan to address as well. If you're watching the recorded version of this, then please reach out to the Maltby Center or KFLNA Public Health with your questions or if you need support. Now, let's take a look at our panel, and here they are. We have Remy from the Maltby Center's mental health team. We have Christina from the Maltby Autism team, and we're happy to have and welcome Dr. Peter Oglaza, Medical Officer of Health for Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington Public Health. Listen, thanks all of you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to make sure that all your microphones are on. If you have them muted, make sure you turn yourself on at this point. But let's get started. Let's talk about where kids are at. It's been a long kind of pandemic, and kids have experienced everything from lockdowns to seeing loved ones become sick to school outbreaks. That's likely taken a toll on their mental health. So, Remy, let's start with you. What have you been hearing about from children, youth, and parents about how they're managing this pandemic?
Thank you, John, for that great intro. People's experiences have varied greatly. On my end, there's definitely been an influx of families expressing children developing increased anxiety, some new phobias, difficulties with emotional regulation that had not been present pre-pandemic, and many having spent so long at home, having trouble now transitioning to environments away from family members. For some, the option to go to spaces and programs in the community has been a welcome refuge from home life, so in-person activities are greatly valued.
Okay, and Christina, you work with children on the autism spectrum. How have they been faring with this pandemic?
Yeah, thanks again, John, for the introduction. That's great. This has been a really challenging time for everybody, and I think we can all agree with that. And throughout the pandemic, Maltby Center has really utilized things such as telehealth to help support families who cannot see us face-to-face, but still offer that opportunity for them. And the families that we support are truly resilient, as well as their children. And as I cannot speak for all children on the autism spectrum, we're really truly amazed by the challenges that they've overcome through working with them as well. So a lot of things have come up for these children and their families, and the Maltby Center is here with open arms to help support where we can.
Okay. And Dr. Oglaza, how are kids in our community handling the pandemic and the changes they're experiencing? How do you think they're doing?
So thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. And my colleagues have captured that really well, their perspective. So what I would add to that is echo that comment that pandemic has been very difficult for everyone. And especially we will see that among the school-age children and their families. Since the start of the year, the school year this year, fortunately, students have now been able to benefit fully from return to that structure and benefits that the in-person schooling provides. Seeing their teachers, seeing their friends and participating in in-person learning has provided tremendous benefits. And benefits that go beyond what we typically think about in-person schooling. It's not just about learning, it's about everything, about mental health, about wellness, about all these physical, mental, spiritual benefits that we get from interacting with others. My hope is that children, as my colleagues already mentioned, they're very resilient. And the hope is that with this rollout of vaccine of 5 to 11-year-olds, children will stay protected against COVID-19 and will continue to enjoy so many activities and events that they were able to participate before the pandemic.
Okay, let's talk about vaccines. Doctor, what can parents expect about the vaccine rollout for 5 to 11-year-olds in our area? You know, most parents have had a vaccine themselves. How's it going to work with their kids?
So our KFLA vaccine plan ensures that the first doses of COVID-19 vaccine will be available to 13,000 eligible children in our community. This is the size of the 5 to 11 population in the KFLA region. And we will continue to offer immunizations through all the existing clinic locations and also increase our presence with the mobile clinics in local schools to allow for that greater capacity, as well as offer familiar surroundings for children and parents to bring to go and get immunizations. That's very important. And also, there's going to be additional avenues for immunization, such as to go through the get vaccinated through the pharmacy or with the local trusted healthcare provider, primary care physician, other primary care providers. They will also be offering vaccine.
Okay, and staying with you, doctor, for a moment. What about expected side effects? A number of adults experience them. What can parents expect for their kids for side effects?
So that's a very important point to make. What we have right now is data from the clinical trials that were used to approve vaccine in Canada for this population. From these trials, we know that this vaccine is highly effective for the 5 to 11 year old population. In this recent study, we've seen the efficacy of greater than 91% for symptomatic disease. So this is pretty good efficacy number. And what's important, there were no severe side effects observed in that clinical trial. In the multi-center clinical trials that included the multiple international locations and children from different parts of the world. And the majority of the side effects were just the injection side effects. So kids were reporting things like localized pain, localized redness. Some were reported fatigue and again, very relatively mild symptoms that were self-resolving. And there were none of the severe ones noted in those trials.
Okay, well, let's start talking about working to prepare your kids. Remy, I know a lot of adults were nervous about getting their needle. It should be no surprise that kids will be anxious as well. Obviously, parents need to prepare their kids. Where do you think they should start?
I would start by, looking at previous needle experiences, if that exists, right? What has worked and what hasn't worked. If your child is fearful about vaccinations or needles in general, providing them space to share their feelings and having an open dialogue should be a priority. Every child is unique and will have differing thoughts and feelings and reactions. So in some instances, giving them lots of advance notice of the appointment is key. And for others, this can create extra nervousness. Sometimes there are children who benefit from knowing as many details as possible about what might happen leading up to an appointment. And this can quell anxiety by eliminating some of the unknowns. And if being aware of the overall steps involved in getting a vaccination will help for your specific child, perhaps calling in the location where you're making the appointment and asking about the process is a simple way to get that information. And for other kids, telling them the day of is most ideal, right? It's about knowing how that specific child operates and trying as best as you can to meet their needs. I was talking to a colleague earlier this week, and we spoke about exposure therapy as an option. There are some great videos on YouTube of folks going through the process of getting a vaccine and videos specifically targeted towards children and youth. So giving kids a chance to watch other people go through the experience might be a great way to prepare.
Okay, doctor, same question to you. How should parents start getting ready?
I think it's very important to be upfront and honest with discussing this with the children. So telling that they won't feel anything is not correct, because they will experience something. But putting it in perspective, they may experience something that is a little bit more than a mosquito bite and a little bit less than the bee sting. And most kids will figure that out. Okay, so it's not nothing, but it's not perhaps something that truly they should be afraid of, because they might be familiar with these type of experiences. It's very important for parents to make it a calm experience. So if as much as possible, trying to pick the date that they don't have to rush, and have that calm presence, because the child will pick up on these cues from their guardians, their parents, and they will respond very, very much aligned. So staying calm, packing some activities, planning what they're going to do and how they're going to distract themselves, and then planning also for some activities when they have to wait a little bit after the appointment would be very important. What's also one thing that I recommend, and I've seen this work really well when I work as a primary care physician as well as parent myself. I find that it really helps children when parents are holding them. So there's a specific hold that the healthcare provider will instruct them how to do that. And having that firm, comforting hold by the parent is really a big help for someone to go through that immunization, through that vaccine, through that experience. I also advise children and parents not to look. It doesn't really add to the experience. Actually, some of the patients, some of the kids were surprised that the vaccination already happened, because they were so anxious and worried, but they didn't look. They didn't even notice. So yeah, that goes against what we were saying earlier, that it doesn't hurt. But some children may not even notice that happening when there's immunization given. So a secure, comforting hold does help a lot. And really no need for any specific pain medications before the appointment. Probably the cues from the parent, that comfort and calmness will be the biggest help that we can give to our children with this.
Okay, Christina, children on the autism spectrum may have a very different experience with needles. What should their parents do to start?
Yes, John, that's very true. Some different things to consider, but sensory needs and things like that. So I can give some suggestions for those who do choose to vaccinate their child. They're not clinical recommendations by any means, just some broad strategies that could help you if you do choose to use them. So parents do know their children best, and thinking on past experiences and how your child handled that is going to be a big indicator on how you're going to deal with these upcoming changes with the new vaccine. So it really depends on your child as well, but some children might take the information in immediately right before, a little bit smoother than if they were to be told beforehand. So say something positive using child-friendly language. We don't want to confuse the child if they're not using language yet. There's things like social stories that you could incorporate as well with pictures to show them sort of what they're preparing for, as well as a big focus on the parents as well, being calm, cool, and collective during this process. Like we had mentioned earlier, preparing ahead of time so you're not rushing around, because your child will pick up on that as well. And of course, always rewards. We are big fans of rewards. So your child's going through a very big milestone in their life. They're putting on their brave face and doing their very best. So setting up something special, a treat ready for them after they leave the building, because they probably won't be able to eat it there, or having a special activity planned for when you're done as well, to sort of motivate them. And good things are coming after this. We just got to put our brave face on now and truck through it.
Okay, now, Remy, what if a child starts to show signs of anxiety before needle day, sleeplessness, worry, and such? What if parents see this? What should they do?
Generally some cognitive restructuring might work in those scenarios. So things like decatastrophizing, some guided questioning, and doing some disputing in order to reduce the anxiety level. So thinking about what could happen versus what might likely happen, pinpointing what the worry is specifically, and then the likelihood that it will come true. So maybe comparing to previous experiences or other evidence to support the answer. And if their worry does come true, right, how can it be dealt with? How will they be supported? For sleeplessness, trying some mindfulness or bodily relaxation exercises, which are all accessible through a quick Google search, and sticking to regular routines as much as possible leading up to the vaccination. And if you feel you need extra support, you're welcome to book a walk-in appointment with us where we can come up with some strategies together.
Okay, now, Christina, same question to you, but on children on the autism spectrum. What if the parents see signs their kids are worried about needle day? What should they do?
Of course, yeah, and that's going to be a real thing that's going to come up among the children and their families that are planning to get their COVID vaccine. And again, these are just some suggestions, not clinical recommendations. As we know, every child is very different, and you as the parent knows them best. So again, talking to your child in a parent-friendly or a child-friendly language, remaining cool, calm, and collective during that conversation, and answering any questions truthfully to your child as well. Setting up those contingency plans that if this does happen, we have a plan for that too, like be here for you and support you through that. Also during like the actual waiting portion of going to get their needle done, if they have a bit of anxiety coming into that, keeping them distracted can be a great strategy for that. Having an iPad available, fidget toys, musical light up toys, some books as well, things to keep them entertained during that waiting period and distracting them from the needle experience itself.
Okay. Now, let's say it's the day of the needle for the parents and the kids. A question to the entire panel. What kinds of things should parents do before, during, and after the needle itself? Let's start with Remy. What do you suggest?
It's been mentioned earlier in the stream, but I think remaining calm, being confident, parents and caregivers, your child best, but it's also about being relaxed, right, and creating a structured environment as much as possible. Trying to make a plan of how it will go ahead of time, right, and sticking to it as much as you can. And as Christina said, allowing your child to maybe listen to some music or watch videos, play with a fidget, bring a stuffed animal, blanket, or comfort toy along to the appointment might be helpful. And then afterwards, right, lots of positive reinforcement and praise. It can be very anxiety-inducing and worrying. It might be a new experience for a lot of children. So just, praising them as much as possible for going through with it.
Okay, and Doctor, same question to you. What's your advice on needle day?
Oh, it's really worth reiterating, and that's a recurring theme. Is parents would really, or the children would really benefit from parents being cool, collected, and calm. It is. We've said it many times, but really this is the main thing. Presenting the needle as something, the vaccine as something good, something that good things will happen in the immediate future. The notion of rewards after the needle is a really big incentive for some children, as well as painting that picture of what their life and activities will now look like, because the vaccine will really help us all, our community, to get through this and get through this safely. Children know about COVID, about Corona. They know more than we would like them to. They may have that residual fear from things they see on the media about deaths, about all these tragic circumstances that are happening. And vaccine is a good thing because that will really keep them safe and protect them. So pointing these facts out may work really well for some children. And as what I mentioned earlier, during and after, it's the destruction, it's the firm, comforting hold, and having something to look forward to post-vaccination. And this has already been said, but I think it's a really important message to the parents that they're doing something really good for the children, and then they're going to have all the benefits from the vaccine.
Okay, now Christina, what about kids on the autism spectrum? What steps do you recommend for needle day?
So I would recommend using the strategies we talked about earlier, a social story to communicate with them what's going to happen, to prepare them for that. Based off the parent's knowledge of their own child, that may look like you're going to do it right before the appointment, or it could be a few days ahead of time. It really depends on your child. And incorporating the distraction item, rewards as well, all as a whole together, and staying cool, calm, and collective while you're doing it. It's a big job for the parent to manage all of this, but they do know their child best, so they know it's going to work well for them. And it's going to really look like just a collaboration of all strategies put into one to help your child. It's not sort of a one fits all, but overall, using these strategies can help make that experience a little bit easier for your child.
Okay. Now, doctor, kids, even 5 to 11-year-olds, are not immune to all the misinformation that's out there about COVID-19 and vaccinations. What if a child has heard some of this misinformation and has a worry? How should parents talk to them?
So that could be a very important teaching moment for an opportunity for each parent to speak to their children about some of the things we know and we know and fear about the internet, that it could be or other sources of information that are not reliable. I would encourage parents to emphasize that vaccination in general, it's an important tool to help spread any or many of the communicable diseases that are vaccine preventable, and that includes COVID-19. And this is something that will enable them to resume normal activities and move forward as a community towards that state where we get COVID pandemic under control. I would use these messages, key messages about what vaccines are, and that there's reputable source of information about vaccines, and there might be other opinions or misinformation out there, but that's simply not true. And I would emphasize the very important point that vaccines are one of the safest interventions known in medical world. There are no shortcuts in development of the vaccine and testing and approval. We waited so long for the 5 to 11 vaccine approval because it was the same stringent, rigorous process that was taken to bring the vaccine to the Canadian market. And I would focus on those, and depending on the child. Understanding of these concepts, I would be very upfront and honest about really what the facts are, and that the information that they're heard is simply not true.
Okay. Now, Remy, let's add the same question to you. What do parents do if a child has some misinformation and is clearly worried about it?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about the conversations, right? Having an open and honest discussion, as well as offering some reliable sources of information. Going onto our public health website and getting some things from there. 5 to 11 is such a wide age range, right? And so keeping it age appropriate, or the conversations age appropriate, is good to remember as well.
Okay, it's time for questions, and we have more than enough. Lots of people have been sending us all sorts of questions. I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but we're going to try, as time permitting, knowing that we are slowly running out of time. If you're watching the recorded version of this and you still have a question, though, listen, contact the Multi-Center or contact KFLNA Public Health to get more answers for your questions. Let's start first with this question. My child is so worried that she is refusing to get a needle. What do I do? Doctor, maybe you want to handle that one. What's the answer?
Yeah, so that's a common challenge that we experience as people or organizations that provide immunization, whether it's primary care or public health. And this is really where the experience of staff who are working in those clinics comes into play. Our staff are very mindful that some children will simply be very anxious and have a significant fear of needles. Our staff been dealing with that when we're doing school-based immunizations for the grade 7, and they understand, they're trained for this, and they know how to help your child get that as comfortable as possible experience in this. So So that's the reassurance that the professionals at the clinic are very well trained in addressing these fears and comforting children and making it as comfortable as possible. What also can help is that children, we encourage parents for children, as we already mentioned earlier, can bring their favorite toy or stuffed animal or screen device, something that will help them with that distraction. And we'll also have the child-friendly puzzles and fun stickers, so that little bit of reward at the end of the process that might help as well. So there's some strategies that our staff at clinic will be able to guide parents and children through for the best possible experience with this process.
Okay, Remy, anything to add to that?
I think inquiring about the source of the worry, right? And going from there, does it have to do with a previous negative experience? Is it a sensory thing? Is it the unknowns or perhaps, encountering a stranger? And perhaps it's misinformation, right? So the first step to reducing the worry is addressing its nature and its origin.
Okay. The next question is, I have a child on the autism spectrum. They have so many sensory issues. I'm worried about where he gets his needle. What are the alternatives? Christina, do you want to start us off? What's the answer to that one?
So for alternatives of where he gets or where the child will get the needle, maybe I'll let Doctor speak on that a little bit more about locations that might help. But if you're going to use maybe a family doctor, calling ahead of time and working through that with your doctor to just plan for some strategies that will help ease your child's anxiety or the sensory issues that might come along with that.
Okay, Doctor, same question to you. What do you suggest?
So one thing that I would add is that depending on the severity of the symptoms or the individual healthcare needs that child typically has, I would connect with the healthcare provider that's providing routine care. So whether that's family primary care physician or whether that's a specialist through a clinic, I would reach out to them for guidance, because there might be options that are very, very much tailored for that individual child, and some certain arrangements can be made to really ease that process. So that's not something that's really appropriate for the general population, but for those children with specialized needs, I would take guidance from the healthcare professionals who are involved in their care on a regular basis.
Okay. Next question. I have some family members in my child's life that don't believe in COVID-19 vaccines. How do I prepare my child for a needle, given all that? That's a good question. Doctor, what's the answer?
This is a hard one because that's really goes into the issue of maybe a bit of a social work. I would be very very upfront in telling the child what the facts are, and there's a significant concern, like what if another trusted adult in that child's life has a different opinion. So that's a really tough environment to navigate, and I think it requires discussion between the guardians, parents ahead of time, so they're not in that position. They're not putting each other in that position. But I would really refer to the expertise of maybe other professionals involved with that family to seek guidance how we can reconcile that sort of offline before we get the child involved. That would be my advice, and I think that's others may have other comments on that.
We're actually running out of time, so I know that in fact there's lots of people out there sending us questions. We only have time for maybe a couple more, so let's just get right to them. I think my child needs some mental health support. Where do I go? Remy, what do you think the answer for that one is?
Yeah, if you would like to get mental health support for your child, or you're feeling like, some previous coping strategies you've used to deal with anxieties or worries maybe aren't as effective, please call us to book a walk-in appointment. The current wait time is approximately 1 week, and appointments can be online, over the phone, or in person. Once at the appointment, you and your child will be able to connect with a registered counselor and discuss what resources and supports would be most appropriate and helpful.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question, and that is from social media. How do I talk to my 5-year-old about how a class in their school was exposed to COVID-19? Now, that's actually a very topical, timely question. Doctor, what would you recommend on that?
From my experience, children, even in that very young age group, are very well aware of what's happening in the world. They're very aware of the pandemic. They may have some residual fears, and they would be probably very worthwhile to explore what is really what is their baseline understanding and what are the baseline worries about COVID-19, and then address them. That this is an extra precaution that's taken to prevent the spread, and put it in a positive way, that this is the way how we beat it. This is the way how we prevent transmission. This is a good thing, and we want to all get back to school as soon as possible. So we may have to take a test, and we may have to do some things that we were not planning on, but like stay home for that duration of time, which might be hard for some families and children. But we'll get through this, and we'll get back to in-person learning. We'll get back to our regular activities, and really take cues from the child to where the worries are. And we might be surprised how much they know or what the worries are in with regards to this. And it's very child dependent, I would say. So I think that open conversation is really the key here.
Okay. Now we are out of time. We have so many questions that are still on our feeds, but we can't get to them. But if you do have a question, there is some places where you can go. But let me just wrap up the entire thing here. I want to thank our panel for being here. And of course, the folks back at the Multi-Center and Public Health for their support for this broadcast tonight. A note that the Multi-Center will in fact be offering 2 other live streams in December. The Parent's Guide to the Holiday Season for Kids with Autism, Wednesday, December 1st at 5:30, and Navigating Your Child's Mental Health Over the Holiday Season, Thursday, December 9th at 5 p.m. You can find out more information about these on the Multi-Center Facebook page. Now remember, if you need help getting your kids ready for their needle or anything else connected to COVID-19, there is help available. For children's mental health and autism, contact the Multi-Center at multicenter.ca. For health-related issues, contact your healthcare provider. You're not alone. We're going to get through this together. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our panel, and thanks to all the people who are sending us questions tonight. Please take care of yourself and stay safe. Bye now.